Hey everybody, welcome to episode 50 of the AskDAP show, where we answer your Volkswagen Audi questions. On this episode, we talk about cooling systems, DCC suspensions, xenon headlight bulbs, and do we hate money?
Is the DCC, say on a new Golf R, stout enough for open track / HPDE?
Okay, so is a DCC suspension good enough for track use? For anybody who's not familiar, DCC is dynamic chassis control. That's the adjustable dampening suspension that comes on the factory from, or as an option on the Golf R and GTIs for the Mark 7s. Here's my personal thoughts on that. I don't really know because I can't tell you because I've never track tested a DCC car, but I would suspect that you're probably okay to do track stuff as long as you're not tracking the car a lot. If you're doing 1 or 2 track events, it's probably going to be okay to put a DCC on there and it'll handle it. But keep in mind, anytime you track a car, you're putting a lot more abuse than the car was initially intending. You know, just the heavy throttle, the hard turning, all the braking, all that stuff. So you're going to put a lot more pressure on every component in the vehicle by tracking your car. Now, does it mean that the suspension is just going to blow up? No, but you're more likely to have an issue related to stuff if you're regularly tracking your car. So if you're just trying to do 1 track day event and that's all you're looking for, I would say you're perfectly fine. If not, then you would want to go and upgrade to a suspension that could handle it, which would be performance coilovers. Obviously on DCC cars, when you upgrade to performance coilovers, they have to have the adjustable stuff to go along with that, assuming you want to retain all the functionality. There are coilovers for DCC cars that maintain all that stuff. I'll put a link to them here where you can check out the Bilstein stuff. And then the other alternative is, I think there's some stuff to actually cancel out the errors, the harnesses that can plug in. But obviously, if you have DCC, it's probably better off to keep it so you can have that to go with it. So hopefully that answers your question, and enjoy your track day.
Jesse B via YouTube says, I have a 2011 Mark 6 2.0 TSI with 59,000 miles. It runs great, no check engine light or any other problems, but once in a while I'll drive for maybe 5 to 30 minutes to run errands. When I come back to start it up, it sputters on the first crank. Sometimes I have to give it gas. On the second crank, it starts like normal. It's hot outside now, so I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but it sputters on the first crank 2 to 3 times a week now. No check engine light or any codes showing. Thanks for your time.
Okay, Jesse, so the issue you're referring to could be a couple different things. My 2 thoughts are it's either crank sensor related or fuel related, which would likely be either the in-tank fuel pump or the fuel pump control module. So I'll put a link to the information we have about the fuel pump control modules on TSIs, where you can check out here. But what I would start by doing is check to faults. Now you said there's no check engine light, and one thing I want to touch on is just because the check engine light doesn't turn on doesn't mean there are no faults in the ECM of the vehicle. So you'd always want to start by checking that. If there are no faults, it would lead me more to the thought that it's related to the fuel pump stuff, either the fuel pump itself or the control module. Most likely the actual fuel pump control module is a problem, and that's probably going to fix your problem. If that's not it, it might be related to the fuel pump itself, but you'll have to dig in deeper to figure out specifically which one of those it is.
Eric via email says, fault code P2181, performance malfunction and cooling system is recurring. Looking to change the coolant temp sensor on my 09 Passat with 2.0T, but I can't find its location. Please advise.
Okay, so you're looking for the location of the coolant temp sensor on a TSI engine. The coolant temp sensor is located in the water pump. This is under the intake manifold on the front of the block, mounted there, and kind of towards the center. It actually runs off of a belt that runs off the intermediate shaft that has like a tiny little belt like this big that runs the water pump. That water pump is a common failure part. I'm sure if you're not familiar with that, I'll put a link to the video that Charles, our buddy the humble mechanic, did about those failures. I'll also put a link to coolant temp sensor so you can check out the gray 2-pin coolant temp sensor for the TSI engine. Another common component to cause malfunction in cooling system faults on pretty much all VWs is the thermostat. Might be something to look at if you are going to be taking a bunch of stuff apart anyway. So hopefully that answers your question and helps you replace your coolant temp sensor.
Shredmonster76 via YouTube says, "Hey Paul, your Mark 5 Xenon bulbs are $35 cheaper than I could find them anywhere else. Are they a different spec bulb than other retailers, or do you just hate money? I need to buy these soon. Do you recommend replacing both at the same time, or is it fine to do just one?"
All right, so first, do we hate money? I don't hate money. So when it comes to pricing, we do our best to offer the best pricing we can up front. Sometimes that means that our pricing isn't going to be the best. Sometimes it means our pricing is going to be the best. We work super hard to be competitive either way, wherever we fall in the pricing spectrum. So your question definitely is a valid concern, especially when it comes to xenon bulbs. There's a ton of fake xenon replica bulbs out there. You can read all about stuff. A lot of times you go on a lot of these places like eBay and Amazon, and they'll say that they bought a bulb that was either genuine or of a brand, something like Philips or Sylvania or some other well-known brand, and the light output is terrible and blah, 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 and a bunch of other stuff. It's really because counterfeiting is super rampant just in general, in the parts business in general, but definitely a lot in that because xenon bulbs are so expensive that obviously, you know, if you're making a fake bulb that costs next to nothing to make, you can charge a lot more money and get paid. So that's one reason why xenon bulbs are really confusing. To answer your question about are ours different in some way, I don't know what you're looking at, so it's hard to say for sure. If you're shopping for a bulb, the ones we use are going to be a genuine replacement bulb, so they're going to be a quality one. I think the one you were referring to is an Osram or a Philips, I can't recall. But either way, those are both quality brands and are going to be a factory replacement as far as color, the color being the temperature of the bulb, being 4300 is usually around the stock temperature of a bulb, and that's going to be the temperature is actually the color. So as you get to be in that 4300 range, it's going to be kind of a whitish blue, and then as you go up to, let's say, 6000, it gets bluer, and 7000 even bluer, and then like 9000 is basically purple. So for anybody who's not familiar with xenon bulbs, that's kind of the deal with that color component. In regards to should you replace them both together, probably so if you're planning on keeping the car, just because xenon bulbs degrade as they age, and if you've already had one blow, the other one's probably eventually going to blow behind it, especially it's a Mark 5, so at newest it's going to be a 7-year-old car. So I would say replace them in a pair if that's financially feasible. If it's not, then just do one and get your car back on the road working properly. I would rather see somebody buy a single bulb that's actually a quality part than buy, let's say, a pair of cheapo eBay bulbs that are probably going to have terrible light output and might blow out quick. So hopefully that answers your question about xenon bulbs. Oh, I almost forgot. We actually have a DIY video for Mark 5 bulbs. We had a headlight. Max, one of the guys who works here, had a headlight from his car that the car is in pieces right now. So he just brought that in, and we shot a quick kind of how to replace the bulb to show you, because it's super hard to replace in the car because you can't see much. You're working kind of blind a lot of the time. So I'll put a link to that video where you can check it out on the Xenon bulb product page for the Mark 5, where you check it out here.
Steve Wu via email says, I have a 2007 Passat 2.0T FSI. I'd like to do some preventative maintenance on the cooling system since the car is nearly 10 years old. So in addition to a cooling flush, I'd also like to replace hoses and any other parts that might fail with age. I'm wondering if you can give me the part numbers or links to the right web pages on your site for all the hoses that I should replace. Also, is there anything else that can be easily replaced while I'm doing this job that are prone to failure? Temperature sensor, thermostat, etc.
All right, Steve. So in my time when I worked at dealerships, we used to get questions like this a lot from like Jiffy Lube type shops and like tire shops that are not super experienced with VW and Audi. And they would want to price out every hose in the cooling system. From my personal opinion, I never recommend doing this. First of all, the hoses are expensive, they're not easy to replace, and there's just no need to replace hoses that aren't broken. I know historically, and it's kind of an American car thing where the hoses over time will get weak and kind of collapse on themselves and have some issues like that. The German hoses don't have issues like that. The only things that do potentially have problems over time that I have seen would be some of the plastic couplers, like will have a nipple on it that if you go to like either take it off or you graze it while you're installing something else in the car, you might break that nipple off. So some of those type of couplers and stuff like that are common to break over time, but that's usually broken during the process of working with them, not actually breaking on their own. The few components on the FSI you might want to look at in the cooling system that have weakness, and I'll put a link to all these in the description just for anybody who's looking, but I'll just run down a quick list. Number one, water pumps. So water pumps are going to be something that the original one has a plastic impeller. The impeller will often come off of the housing itself and eventually stop circulating coolant. That would be done during a timing belt service, or should be done during a timing belt service. So at 10 years, you might have already done that and you might not need a water pump. The next ones would be coolant temp sensor. It's while you have the car apart, it's a fairly inexpensive part and they are failure prone a little bit. So I would replace that while you're in there. Thermostats are common to have the issue, as I mentioned earlier, about getting stuck open and causing malfunction and cooling system faults. That was more prevalent on the FSI, so that would be one you want to look at as well. Aside from that, the last one I would really mention on the FSI would be the coolant flange. This would be on the side of the cylinder head. They have a vacuum pipe that runs through there on the FSI engines. A lot of times something will break on that, either causing it to leak or actually where the vacuum pipe mounts will crack, causing a vacuum leak. So you'll have to actually replace the whole assembly because that vacuum leak is now an issue. So that's something that if you have the cooling system open and you're doing all this stuff anyway, that's definitely something to consider. Aside from that, again, I do not recommend replacing hoses and stuff like that just completely unnecessarily. A lot of the hoses are generally pretty expensive. You know, like an upper and a lower radiator hose are probably somewhere in the neighborhood, and this is just, I'm just throwing this out there as a number off my head, but probably somewhere in the neighborhood of about $100 to $120 per hose. So to spend let's say $250 on hoses that there's nothing wrong with, I see as a waste of money. You're way better off investing that money into things like timing belts or other maintenance related parts that are more important on the vehicle. Thank you for watching episode 50 of the AskDAP show, where we answer your Volkswagen Audi questions. If you have any feedback about the question answered in this show, be sure to leave it in the comments below. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more like it.